What kind of clickbait thumbnail can I make with this? Does this work? I think that's work. If not, I'll just do something else without my face in it. Okay, let's do this. Hey, what's up everyone? Danny here. Not too long ago, Nvidia reached out and said that they wanted to send me an RTX 2060 to test and review. This thing right here. I gotta be honest, when I first saw the email, my eyes opened up real wide and I couldn't believe it. I thought the email was like either fake or a scam because prior to this, I had never been contacted by any of the big three companies. The big three being Nvidia, AMD, and Intel. Now, I want to be completely transparent. I did not have to pay for this review sample, but at the same time, this is not a sponsored video, meaning that I wasn't given a script or monetary compensation to only say nice things, and it's not my goal in this video to only make Nvidia look good, as most sponsored content would be. I'm not going to be like, hey guys, this is the RTX 2060. It's really cool. It'll make your computer 10 times faster, and you'll be unstoppable when killing all the 9-year-olds. And it can be yours for the low price of only $349.99. Totally worth it. Order one today and use code NOBE for 1% off at the checkout. That's not what this video is gonna be. That's not how reviews are done on my channel. I'll try to be as unbiased and as fair as possible and take into consideration multiple factors in my evaluation, including the used market. So let's check it out and see if this may be worth your money. So the RTX 2060 they sent me is their Founders Edition card, which features a dual fan open air cooler, departing from their long tradition of releasing reference cards with a single fan blower cooler. Hopefully they continue this trend moving forward because I think most of us definitely welcome the lower temperatures and noise levels from this design. The MSRP for this is $350, which is the most expensive any card of the 60 level tier has been in any generation, dating back almost a decade. If you look all the way back to the GTX 260, all the way up to the prior generation GTX 1060, the 60 tier cards have always fallen somewhere between $200 to $300. So that trend has been broken with the 2060, and if you're asking why that is, it's because of that RTX badge it's wearing. RTX products are in the family of graphics cards that are powered by Nvidia's Turing architecture, which gives them the ability to implement real-time ray tracing and deep learning super sampling, or DLSS for short. Ray tracing is a rendering method that actually uses physics to determine the path of light and how it interacts with objects. You can essentially follow the path of each light ray from the source as it bounces around from object to object. What you get is super realistic graphics because the lighting acts like it would in real life, reflection off of different textures, refraction when light passes through transparent and translucent objects like glass or water, shadows. All these things have an increased level of realism to them when rendered with ray tracing. This doesn't come for free, however, as it requires a lot of computing power and will cause a noticeable decrease in your performance. DLSS, on the other hand, actually aims to improve performance as it's an alternative to traditional anti-aliasing methods, which smoothens and blends jagged edges to provide a higher quality image. Normally this would take a performance hit because the workload would be done on the CUDA cores, but with DLSS, Nvidia is leveraging Turing's tensor cores, which didn't exist in previous architectures, and uses them with AI so that less raw data and computational power is needed to perform the super sampling. The big disclaimer in all of this though is that these technologies are still pretty new and not all games support them yet, so take from that what you will. You are paying a premium for future-proofing yourself when this does become more widely available and used. Now I'm not going to read off all the main specs for this card because they've been readily available for a while now, but I'll put them on the screen for those of you who want a refresher. Feel free to pause the video to have a look. The GTX 1060 and 1070 Ti specs are also provided for a side-by-side comparison. One important thing to note, and this is something that some people are up in arms about, is that 6 GB of video memory, because this card basically has the performance of the prior generation's 1070 Ti, but both that and the 1070 had 8 GB. Granted, the 2060 is GDDR6 compared to GDDR5 previously. From what I can see in testing, the VRAM capacity is not an issue right now, and if I had to guess, I think it would only be an issue in a few years' time when most people would start to consider upgrading to whatever's new at that point anyways. But as with most graphics cards in the past, if you want to stretch your time with it, then you just have to go in and fine-tune the graphics settings a bit, and you'll be good to go. It'd be a bit ridiculous to expect this card to still run games that are coming out a couple years from now still at ultra settings. That's what the new cards at that time are supposed to do. So personally, I wouldn't worry about the 6 GB not being enough. But let's take a look at the performance numbers I got from when I tested it. For reference, the main specs of the test system I benchmarked on has an Intel i7-8700K that's overclocked to 4.8 GHz on all cores, 16 GB of DDR4 RAM at 3000 MHz, and for the 2060 I applied a core overclock of 75 MHz in Afterburner, which was about as high as I could go while remaining stable across all the titles. This combined with GPU Boost 4.0 pushed it to roughly 2 GHz during testing, and for the video memory I applied an overclock of 800 MHz. These are the tests I ran, and I did so in both 1080p and 1440p because those are the resolutions that Nvidia targeted with this card. I ran benchmarks for 5 synthetic programs and 7 games. If the games had a built-in benchmarking feature, I made sure to use it because it gives the exact same run every single time. And since I ran everything in 2 resolutions, it lets you make a more precise side-by-side comparison because you don't have to worry about variables that are out of your control affecting the results. So for the synthetic benchmarks, I'm going to breeze right through them because these are mostly here so that you can use the same settings and cross-reference the scores to your own systems. First up, we have Unigine Heaven, which is almost a decade old, but it's still a good one that can push your graphics card pretty hard. And I used the max settings available on both runs, and at 1080p I scored 2659 and at 1440p I scored 1593. For superposition, I used the 1080p Extreme preset and scored 4826, and with the same setting at 1440p scored 2682. I ran all 3 Firestrike benchmarks, Standard, which is 1080p, Extreme, which is 1440p, and Ultra, which is 4K, because why not, and I scored 18,854, 9358, and 4725 respectively. It's actually pretty funny that each resolution bump effectively cut the score in half each time. I ran TimeSpy, which is a 1440p DX12 benchmark, and scored 8268. The last synthetic benchmark I ran was the 3D Mark Port Royal benchmark, which tests ray tracing, and I scored 4021. Moving on to the games, in Fortnite at 1080p I cranked the settings up to the max epic settings, and I got an average of 133 FPS with a 1% low of 85 and 0.1% low of 48. Leaving those settings and upping the resolution up to 1440p, I saw an average of 87 FPS with a 1% low of 67 and 0.1% low of 40. Jumping over to PUBG, at 1080p ultra settings, I got an average of 114 FPS with a 91 1% low and 49.1% low. At 1440p, the average FPS was 74, followed by 63 and 49 for the 1% and 0.1% lows. For Rainbow Six Siege, I used the built-in benchmarking tool, and at 1080p ultra settings, I got an average of 253 FPS, 197 1% and 174.1%. Keeping those same settings at 1440p, I got an average of 168, 138 1% and 133.1%. Next up is Far Cry 5 with this built-in benchmarking tool, and at 1080p ultra settings I got 109, 73 and 38 for the average, 1% and 0.1% respectively. At 1440p with the same settings, the scores were 78, 69 and 65 respectively again. The last Ubisoft game in my testing was Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and Ubisoft is killing it with their built-in benchmarking tools. I personally find them super useful for fine-tuning graphic settings, and I wish every game had this feature. And at 1080p and ultra-high settings, I got a 64 FPS average, 48 1% and 31.1%. At 1440p, I actually had to bump the settings down a notch to the very high preset just to stay above the 60 FPS, and I actually got similar results to what we saw at 1080p with a 62 average, 46 1% and 41.1% lows. One of my good friends was able to get me an invite for the Anthem demo weekend so I could get in there and test it. So big shout out to you, AJ. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And at 1080p, I was not able to hit an average 60 FPS on Ultra. So I had to lower it to high, and I got an 85 average, 61% and 48.1% lows. At 1440p at the same settings, I was barely able to scrape by with a 60 FPS average and 45 and 39 lows. Do keep in mind though that this is from a pre-launch version of the game, and future patches may change the results. Last was Battlefield 5, the only game I could check out ray tracing on. At 1080p ultra settings with ray tracing off, I got an average of 106 FPS with 67 and 62 1% and 0.1% lows. At the same settings but with ray tracing on, the performance effectively cut in half as I was seeing an average of 53 FPS, 35 1% and 21.1 lows. You can definitely get better numbers by lowering the ray tracing quality or the overall settings, but I wanted to show the drastic example of how much a performance hit you can take by enabling it. At 1440p I tested with ray tracing off because my opinion is that this card was made for it at 1080p. If you want to do it at 1440p, you're gonna have to play less demanding titles, but right now we're looking at a AAA title. I also had to lower the graphics from ultra to high just so I can stay above 60 FPS, and I got an average of 80 with 51 and 48 1% and 0.1%. So the 2060 can pretty much handle any game you throw at it at max settings and 1080p, so long as you're not looking for ultra high frame rates on some of the newest and more demanding titles like AC Odyssey and Anthem, as you just saw. And it does a pretty good job at getting you at least 60 FPS average on most titles at 1440p on at least high, and sometimes you can squeeze in the ultra settings. But with that performance, let's take a look at the value. Nobody was happy to hear that the 60 tier card from Nvidia's newest lineup was going to cost $100 more at launch than the previous generation's launch price, the 1060 at $250. You know, sure, we're getting new features that in the long run would be great for PC gaming, and they have to start somewhere, but paying that premium for the early adopters fee, it just doesn't feel so great. So you could just go out and buy a GTX 1070 Ti if you were looking for roughly the same performance, right? Well, not exactly. That launched at $450, and due to the whole fiasco we went through with cryptocurrency and now them phasing out for the new line of cards, they aren't really available for reasonable prices anymore, with most online listings at MSRP or even higher. So for the people who want to buy one brand new, you're out of luck because you're not going to see a lower price than that. But there's always the used market, right? For the people who are okay with secondhand parts. Well, not exactly, because the best alternative to the 2060 at the moment is, like I said, the 1070 Ti or the 1080, and the most accessible place to get them is eBay. Now, I know you can get them locally too, and that may be cheaper, but I'm addressing a broad audience here, and eBay is the best place to find used parts for the masses, and it has a more stable market price than individual local ads. So on eBay, the 1070 Ti and 1080 are going on average for around $320 to $350 respectively. I'm usually okay with used parts though, you know, I buy used parts all the time if the price is right, but at this point the price difference we're seeing isn't that much. We also can't forget that with the 2060 you're likely able to get it bundled with like a AAA title that effectively lowers that $350 price even more, assuming you are already planning to buy the game it comes with, or if you can sell it and offset the price. Now at the end of the day, what are my recommendations, right? Well, you probably don't want to hear this, but it actually depends. If you're a person that deal hunts in the used market, you know that there's no comparison when it comes to price to performance of landing something secondhand at an outlier price. You're balancing between cost and some risk. But if you're someone that typically buys parts brand new because you either want the peace of mind of the warranty or knowing the complete history of it, then this is going to be the card for you if you're building a system in the price range of anywhere from like $800 to $1,000. You're not going to be able to find much better for the price, and I'm even planning on using it for a build that I'm helping a friend with soon for around $900. You know, this isn't me shilling, this isn't me trying to get in Nvidia's good graces. I'm actually not too fond of paying for the ray tracing premium right now because I can barely tell the difference, you know. Sure, at the Nvidia presentations, when they do things in slow motion and you look really close and super hard, you can see the differences with it on and off, but for most use cases, when you're running around and moving with the pace of the game, I find it really hard to tell, and I don't think it's worth it given the performance hit or having to pay this premium for the early stages of the tech. But again, with all that said, my recommendation still remains the same. Remember, I frequent the used market a lot too, but not everyone buys used, and I understand that. People value buying new hardware for one reason or another, and there's no problem with that. Think about it this way, like how do things get on the used market in the first place? Someone at some point had to have bought it new, and there wouldn't even be a used market without a considerable amount of people buying new parts. Anyways, those are my thoughts on it. I really want to know what you all think. Do you agree or disagree with what I've said in this video about the RTX 2060? Let me know down in the comments below. And other than that, I hope you all enjoyed this video and found it helpful in some way or another. I want to thank you all as always for watching and supporting the channel. It feels great to be back and making content again. I can't wait to make more. But yeah, I will see you in the next video. Bye.